Her parents rejected her black fiancé, said, "You are not welcome." What they didn't know was that the man they tried to shut out was a millionaire. But by the time they realized it, it was already too late. Marcus didn't walk in with a chip on his shoulder. He walked in with flowers. One hand in his coat pocket, the other holding tightly to Emily's. She had begged him to give her parents a chance, and even though he had a feeling this dinner would go south, he said yes, for her. The house was as polished as he expected. White pillars, brick steps, a Range Rover out front, the kind of place where every window had matching curtains and every smile came with a side of judgment. Her father opened the door like he'd been warned. He offered Marcus a handshake, firm but cold, no eye contact. Her mother appeared behind him, apron still on, dabbing her hands with a towel like she'd been scrubbing something she didn't want seen. "Come in," she said tightly. "You must be Marcus." He nodded. "Thanks for having me." The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. The pause, the evaluation. As if his skin was already saying too much before he had a chance to speak. They walked through a silent hallway lined with family photos, birthday parties, beach trips, golf clubs. Every frame was a reminder, you don't belong here. At the dinner table, the mood was stiff. Emily tried her best to fill the awkward silences with small talk, laughter, compliments on the roast. But her parents? They sat upright. Forks clinked. Wine glasses refilled just a little too often. Marcus could feel it. The room wasn't waiting for him to fit in. It was waiting for him to slip up. They hadn't said anything yet. No direct insults. No slurs. But every glance was a loaded question. What was a man like him doing with a girl like their daughter? Marcus had faced worse. He'd walked into boardrooms with more tension than this. But this one stung different. Because this wasn't business. This was personal. This was family. And in their eyes, he was the problem that needed to be fixed. It started with the questions. Not the kind meant to spark conversation. The kind meant to measure him. To dissect. To find the flaw. "So, Marcus," her father said, swirling his wine, "where exactly did you grow up?" The question was casual, but the emphasis on exactly hit hard. "Atlanta," Marcus replied, setting down his glass. "West Side." Her father smiled, but only with his mouth. "Ah, the West Side. Isn't that a little rough around the edges?" Emily shifted in her seat. "Dad." He held up a hand. "Just curious." Then came her mother. "And what is it that you do again? Emily said something about tech, but what does that mean?" Marcus smiled politely. "I run a software firm. We design platforms for medical data integration. Hospitals, insurance networks. It's niche, but important." Her mother blinked like she didn't understand a single word. Or didn't care to. "That sounds interesting. And stable?" It was a loaded word. Stable. She meant, do you make enough money to take care of our daughter? Do you own anything? Do you even belong at this table? Marcus answered with calm precision. Very. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the questions. It was the tone, the pauses, the glances between her parents. Every answer he gave wasn't received. It was processed. Like a resume, they were looking for reasons to reject. Emily tried to jump in. Marcus graduated top of his class from Georgia Tech. He built his company from the ground up. He works with major hospitals across the country. Her mother cut her off. "Oh, sweetie, we're not interrogating him. We're just making conversation." But it wasn't a conversation. It was a cross-examination. Marcus had spent his whole life in rooms like this, being polite, impressive, overqualified just to be seen as enough. But nothing he said tonight would matter, because they had already made up their minds. This wasn't about his background. This was about his blackness. And no degree, no company, no polished shoes or soft-spoken answers were going to change that. Still, he sat tall, smiled, ate their food, Let them underestimate him. Because what they didn't know? The real test hadn't even started yet. The wine had nearly run dry. The roast sat half-eaten. And still, her father hadn't stopped watching Marcus like he was waiting for something, a crack in the armor, a reason to say what he'd been holding back since the front door opened. He finally found one. Emily had just finished describing their vacation plans. We were thinking of doing South Africa next year. Maybe hit Cape Town, go on safari. Her father leaned forward, that same polite smile. But now, there was a glint in his eye. So, tell me, Marcus, when you picture your future with my daughter, where do you see yourselves living? In one of those West Side neighborhoods you mentioned? The table went still. Emily dropped her fork. Marcus looked at him unfazed. We haven't decided yet. We're weighing options. Her father nodded slowly, then tilted his head. See, that's the thing. When I imagined the man my daughter would bring home, I always pictured someone more familiar, someone who understands our world, our values. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Then came the sentence that changed the entire room. You're not what we hoped for. Emily stared at her father in disbelief. Dad, what the hell? He didn't blink. Her mother shifted awkwardly, sipping her wine like it might erase the moment. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't break eye contact. He'd heard worse in his life, but this one cut deeper, because it wasn't just about him. It was about what kind of future Emily's parents thought their daughter deserved, and who they thought didn't qualify. Marcus calmly placed his napkin on the table. I didn't come here to meet your expectations. I came here because Emily asked me to. Her father leaned back, arms crossed. And now you have. The silence was suffocating. Not even the sound of utensils. Just the weight of assumptions, pride, and a wall Marcus had no interest in climbing. Emily looked between her parents and the man she loved, her face caught between shame and fury. She had grown up believing her parents were classy, educated, civil. But in one sentence, her father had revealed the truth. It wasn't class they valued. It was control. And the worst part? Marcus hadn't even raised his voice. Because people like her father never expected someone like Marcus to walk in with more power than they could see. Emily had stormed off to the kitchen, whispering something sharp under her breath. Her father stayed, planted at the table, unmoved, eyes still fixed on Marcus like a challenge had been issued, and refused. But it was her mother who made the next move. She stood up slowly, brushing invisible crumbs from her lap, and gave Marcus a tight smile. Would you mind giving me a hand in the hallway for just a second? Marcus glanced toward the kitchen. Emily was out of earshot. He stood, calm as ever, and followed her into the narrow hallway near the coat rack. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums before a storm. She turned to face him, arms crossed, voice low but deliberate. I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus. I know Emily's heart is in the right place, but this isn't going to work. Marcus didn't respond. He just let her speak. You're not what we pictured for her. Not in background, not in culture, not in lifestyle. She looked him up and down like she was taking inventory. And frankly, you're not welcome here. There it was. No more filters, no coded language, no fake warmth. Just cold, controlled rejection, delivered with the same tone she might use to return a handbag that didn't match her shoes. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Not a laugh, not anger, just a quiet breath, the kind you let out when something finally confirms what you already knew. I understand, he said softly. She wasn't expecting that. Her eyes narrowed. You seem like a nice enough man, but love doesn't erase differences. And if Emily chooses you, she chooses a different life, a harder one. Then she leaned in just slightly. And I don't think she's ready to give all this up. Marcus looked her in the eye. With all due respect, I don't think you have any idea what she'd be gaining. And just like that, he stepped past her and walked back into the dining room. Her face twitched just for a moment, like she realized she might have underestimated him. But the damage was done. The hostility wasn't imagined anymore. It had a voice, a face, a name. It wore pearls and whispered poison behind linen-draped tables. And while Emily had once promised her parents would come around, Marcus now knew they wouldn't. Because they didn't see him as a man. They saw him as a warning. And the only reason they tolerated his presence was because they hadn't yet discovered who he really was. When Marcus re-entered the dining room, Emily was already back in her seat. Her eyes searched his face immediately, like she could tell something had happened, even if she didn't yet know what. He didn't say a word, just gently pulled out his chair and sat down. The silence that followed wasn't the kind you fill with small talk. It was the kind that waits to explode. Her father cleared his throat, then tapped his glass with the edge of a knife, like he was making a toast. But what came out wasn't a celebration. "It's time we speak plainly," he said. Emily's posture stiffened. Her mother came in from the hallway and took her seat without looking at Marcus. "You're both adults," her father continued. "And while we can't control who you date, Emily, we do still have some say in what kind of life you walk into." Emily narrowed her eyes. "Say what you mean." He looked at her, tone flat. "If you marry Marcus, your trust fund is done. The wedding? We won't support it. The house? Gone. You'll be on your own." The room went still. Marcus didn't react. But Emily? Her face turned pale. "Are you serious right now?" she asked. "You're bribing me to leave him?" Her mother reached out, voice soft like poison in honey. "We're protecting you. Love is sweet in your 20s. But reality hits later, when you're raising children, navigating careers, trying to fit into circles that he just won't understand." She didn't even look at Marcus when she said it, as if he weren't sitting right there. Emily turned to him, eyes filled with apology and disbelief. Marcus stayed calm, because the truth is, this wasn't new to him. He'd spent years watching power move in subtle ways, watching people use money, status, access as weapons. This wasn't love from her parents. It was control dressed up as concern. So he reached for his napkin, wiped his hands, and looked her straight in the eyes. "I don't want you to choose," he said. "I want you to be free, whatever that means." That broke her, because now the pressure wasn't just from her family. It was from her own heart. The man who loved her wasn't going to fight her parents. He was going to let her decide. And in that moment, Emily realized something chilling. Her parents weren't worried about losing her to a man they didn't approve of. They were terrified of losing control over a daughter who was finally thinking for herself. Marcus didn't slam the door. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand respect from people who had already decided he didn't deserve it. He simply stood up, placed his napkin on the table with a grace that made it feel like he was the host, and said, "Thank you for dinner." Emily stood too, her hand wrapped around his arm like she didn't want him to carry this moment alone. But Marcus wasn't carrying anything heavy. Not anymore. Not their judgment. Not their threat. Not their version of who he should be. Her father gave a tight nod. Her mother offered a hollow, "Good night." Neither stood to walk them out. As they stepped into the cold evening air, Emily finally let out a breath she'd been holding since the appetizers. Her voice trembled. "I'm so sorry. That was disgusting. I didn't know they could be like that." Marcus turned to her, still calm, still collected. "I did." She blinked. "Then why did you come?" He paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Because I needed them to show you who they really are, not who they pretend to be." The car ride home was quiet at first. Then Emily broke the silence. "They think you're not good enough for me." Marcus chuckled under his breath, not bitterly, but with the kind of tired amusement that comes from a life of being underestimated. "That's the thing," he said. "They think I'm some broke dreamer chasing tech money, but they don't know." She turned to look at him. "Don't know what?" He glanced at her and finally said it. "I own the platform hospitals are using. I built it. I hold the patents. I run the company. I'm not trying to make it. I made it." Her mouth parted. "Wait, what?" "I never told you," he said, "because I wanted to know who saw me. Not the dollars, not the press, not the title." Emily stared at him, stunned. "You're a millionaire?" He nodded. And just like that, the power dynamics shifted, not between them, but between him and the people who had written him off before the salad had even been served. But Marcus wasn't planning revenge. He was planning clarity. Because if they were going to judge him based on skin tone instead of substance, then maybe it was time to show them just how much they never saw coming. Emily couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the wine, not because of the silence that lingered between her and Marcus, but because the words, "You're not welcome here," kept echoing in her head, and now they sounded even worse. Because the man her parents rejected wasn't just successful. He was wealthy, brilliant, respected in a world far beyond their imagination. She sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone, heart racing. She typed in the name of Marcus's company, the one he never bragged about, the one he only ever called work. And there it was. News articles, interviews, a Forbes feature from last year. The tech visionary quietly reshaping healthcare. Marcus's face smiled back at her in black and white. She clicked through. Founded his company at 27, bootstrapped it with nothing but a laptop and an idea. Now partnered with over 140 hospitals nationwide. Valuation estimated at over $40 million. He wasn't just successful, he was historic. And her parents hadn't even asked about it. They didn't want to know, because in their minds, they had already filled in his story based on how he looked, where he grew up, the rhythm of his voice, the texture of his skin. They assumed startup meant broke. They assumed Atlanta meant dangerous. They assumed black meant not good enough. But Marcus had outbuilt every man they'd probably hoped Emily would bring home. He wasn't the man they imagined. He was more. And it struck her painfully that if he had flaunted the wealth, the title, the black card, maybe they would have smiled more, pretended to accept him. But Marcus didn't need to prove anything, and that's what scared them most. Because they weren't rejecting a man who lacked potential. They were rejecting a man who already had everything, except their approval. And he wasn't asking for it. Emily looked over at him sleeping, calm, steady, peaceful. And for the first time in her life, she realized her parents' standards weren't about values. They were about control. And they had just tried to throw away a man who represented everything they claimed to respect because he didn't look the way they wanted. 2 weeks passed. Emily hadn't spoken to her parents since that night. They hadn't reached out either. The silence between them didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a line had been drawn. One she was no longer afraid to cross. But Marcus? He hadn't said much about it. He'd been focused, calm, patient, until one night, over takeout and jazz playing low in the background, he looked up and said, "Would you be willing to invite them to dinner again?" Emily blinked. "What?" "A neutral setting, somewhere public, classy, not your house, not ours, just dinner." She studied his face. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just a quiet plan unfolding behind his eyes. And when Marcus said the name of the restaurant he had in mind, her jaw dropped. It was the most exclusive spot in the city, waitlist only, private wine cellars, handwritten menus, a place where CEOs proposed mergers and senators scheduled quiet meetings. Emily didn't ask questions. She just nodded. The invitation went out the next day. A simple message from Emily. "Marcus and I would love to treat you both to dinner. Just the four of us. Thursday night. Hope you'll come." They said yes. Of course they did. Because in their minds, they still held the upper hand. They thought this was an apology tour. a last attempt at earning approval. They had no idea. It was a mirror. When they arrived that night, her father was in his usual navy blazer, her mother in pearls and quiet judgment. They walked into the restaurant like they owned it, only to be led past the main dining room, past the velvet ropes, and into a private suite with their name already on the reservation card. They looked confused, almost flustered. Marcus stood up to greet them, calm, friendly. The server approached. "Mr. Carter, your sommelier will be right in with the tasting list." Her father blinked. "You know the staff here?" Marcus smiled. "You could say that." What no one at that table expected was that this dinner wasn't about repairing bridges. It was about flipping the entire foundation they thought they controlled. Because by the time the entrees arrived, the parents weren't just guests. They were being hosted in a world they didn't even know Marcus owned. By the third course, something had changed. The air had softened, not with warmth, but with discomfort. Her father was quieter now, suddenly very interested in the wine list. Her mother had stopped asking about career stability and started complimenting the table settings, the lighting, the menu, everything but Marcus. Because slowly, they were realizing something. This wasn't a dinner date. This was a reality check. The food was exceptional. Filet mignon with truffle butter, imported sea bass flown in from Japan that morning, personalized wine pairings, champagne poured without asking. Every time the sommelier returned, he addressed Marcus directly. "Would you like to sample the Barolo Reserve, sir? Chef wanted to thank you personally for the referral." It wasn't just expensive. It was his world. And they were just trying to keep up. Her father cleared his throat, finally breaking the silence. "This is quite the evening. Very generous of you." Marcus nodded politely. "It's nothing. I enjoy good meals with good company." That line landed like a soft punch, because they both knew they hadn't been good company. Not weeks ago. Not even tonight. Then came the final moment. The server walked in, placed a folded black leather check holder on the table. Discreet, elegant, and without missing a beat, Marcus slid it toward himself. No glance, no hesitation. He opened it, slipped in a black Amex with his name on it, and handed it back. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," the server said. "It's been a pleasure." Emily's mother blinked hard. Her father's jaw tightened. They didn't speak, because they suddenly understood. The man they judged for not fitting into their world had just bought the table they were sitting at. Silently, effortlessly. They hadn't rejected a charity case. They had disrespected a man who could have bought their entire social circle and still had room to tip. And now, they had nothing left to say. The table sat in silence long after the check disappeared. Her father swirled what was left of his wine like it might refill itself. Her mother adjusted her necklace over and over, as if the pearls were suddenly too tight. And Marcus? He sat with the same calm he'd carried since the front door of their home weeks ago, except now, it wasn't armor. It was confirmation. He had shown them exactly who he was, without ever raising his voice. Emily reached for his hand beneath the table, and this time, she held it not just with love, but with pride. That's when her father finally broke. "Marcus," he said, trying to keep his tone level, "we may have misjudged you." Marcus didn't react. Her mother leaned in, voice gentler now. "You've clearly built something incredible we didn't know, and we'd like to move forward, wipe the slate clean." Marcus looked at them, not with anger, not with smugness, but with something far more powerful: peace. "Appreciate that," he said. Another pause. Her father nodded. "So we'd love to host you again. A proper dinner, just us. Maybe start fresh." Marcus smiled softly. "I don't think that's necessary." The words landed harder than any insult. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and glanced at the server who was already holding the door open. "You made your expectations clear," he said. "I just wanted to show you mine." Her mother blinked. "We didn't mean—" Marcus stopped her with a look. "No hard feelings," he said. "But I was never asking for your approval, just your honesty. And now I've got it." Emily rose beside him, arm in arm. They walked out together, past the velvet ropes, past the whispers from staff who knew exactly who Marcus was, and into the night. Behind them, the private suite felt colder, emptier, because the power her parents thought they held was never really theirs to begin with. It belonged to the man they tried to push out of the picture, who walked away without ever raising his voice, because he didn't need to prove his worth to anyone.